which is, I think, one of the reasons why Democrats are fighting the confirmation so hard, then someone like John Roberts would, in fact, become the swing justice on the court. But I would remind your listeners as well with regard to Bush v. Gore in 2000, and I remember going to bed that night thinking, well, we'll just figure this out in the morning, and boy, was I wrong. But the Supreme Court jumped in that, and there was a lot of controversy, I think, on the left and the right over the appropriateness of doing so, and they actually put a little asterisk there and said, this shall not be precedent.
Well, James, I'd love to continue this for a few more hours, but unfortunately we're up against the clock, and thank you so much for your time, and we'd love to have you back on. James Wallner with us right here in the Ringside Politics program, and a big thank you to all of our great participants on Real America's Voice. We'll be back with you tomorrow right here in the airwaves. Hey, coming up next, we're going to go to Just the News AM with Just the News White House correspondent Carrie Sheffield for a report on everything going on all across the country and the White House, and look forward to that on Real America's Voice. More coming your way on the radio right here on Ringside.
Are here. Let's get right into it. First, overnight, there was the ongoing back and forth between Trump supporters and Biden supporters about Tuesday night's debate. It's still going on. Let's see what the president had to say first. If we can put up his tweet, in response to Ari Fleischer, who was a spokesman for George W. Bush, you see Ari there, he says, I rewatched the start of the debate. The first question went to Trump, who gave an uninterrupted 2-minute response. Then Biden gave an uninterrupted 2-minute response. Then it went back to Trump, whose answer was interrupted 3 times by Biden. If you didn't like it, blame Biden for starting it. So then you got the president responding and saying, thank you, Ari. You're going to keep hearing more about this, the back and forth of whether the president came on too strong. But the argument that his team is likely going to make is that, as his legendary phrase in 2016 was, that if someone punches the president, he punches back 10 times harder. So that certainly seemed to be the case when it came to his performance in terms of how he certainly came out swinging against Joe Biden. Joe Biden responded in kind by calling him a clown, also telling him to shut up at one point. We also got a tweet here from Joe Biden after the debate. He says that white supremacy has no place in America. We shouldn't have to beg the president of the United States to say that. Now, this, of course, is opening up another big debate about whether the president properly denounced white supremacists. But over and over, his supporters went back and reviewed the multiple times that the president has repeatedly over the years denounced white supremacy. The president also has a very large roster of African American and Latino surrogates and supporters. In fact, later in the show, we've got the spokeswoman who is the head of RNC Hispanic Outreach, who's going to talk about this topic. So we'll get more on that. And so we want to keep you up to speed on that. Another issue is from the Republican Party itself as well. Ronna McDaniel, who is the chairwoman, we're going to put up a tweet from her. She talked about a court ruling in Maine. What she says is there is big news. A Maine court sided with the RNC and upheld the ban on ballot harvesting, voter ID requirements, election day deadline, signature match requirements, clean sweep in a bogus Democrat lawsuit, and another victory in our fight to protectthevote.com. So, as you can see there, that was in Maine. The Republican Party has been bringing a patchwork of lawsuits and litigation all over the country, from Pennsylvania to Nevada, Iowa, and there you have that in Maine. This also turns the temperature up again on the fight over the Supreme Court, because the president has said repeatedly, if this election, this November election, goes to the Supreme Court, he needs to have a definitive ability to not have a tie, because right now you got 4 and 4. If there is a 9th member seated, then there will not be a tie. Now, in other news, I want to put up on the Democratic side a tweet from Nancy Pelosi, and she's talking about what's happening on the debate over a coronavirus stimulus package, additional funding, and also just the overall tax approach for Republicans versus Democrats. She says it is a sign of President Trump's disdain for America's working families that he has spent years abusing the tax code while passing a GOP tax scam for the rich that gives 83% of the benefits to the wealthiest 1%. Now, she's speaking there as well about a New York Times report about the president's taxes. We are going to get more into that with a special guest who is a tax expert, Mr. Julio Gonzalez. He has a lot to say about the New York Times approach here in terms of whether, first of all, it was even legal for them to obtain these tax returns. He has a lot to say on that, but also the substance as well as far as how much Trump paid. Stick around for that. Now, I also want to throw to a clip here. My colleague, we have an exclusive interview with AOC, as they call her, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and my colleague Nick Balasay had an exclusive with her. Take a listen.
And the Green New Deal, he distanced himself from it. Yeah. You tweeted about it. You were saying that's no surprise. What do you think about where we're at with the Green New Deal versus the Biden plan?
Yeah.
Where do you want him to go? You want him to go further on which parts of the Green New Deal?
Yeah, you know, I think, as I mentioned, I'm proud to have been part of the Climate Unity Task Force, and I think that we really made a lot of improvements to the initial plan put out by Biden's team, and so I'm looking forward to it. The whole point is that we have to shift our thinking from thinking this is a 50-year solution problem to this now needing to be an immediate commitment problem.
And there you have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez talking about the issue of climate change and the Green New Deal. Now, we noted here at justthenews.com about how you see in the debate, the president was able in many respects to put some daylight between Joe Biden and the Green New Deal. And we noted that the vice presidential candidate, the pick for Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, is a sponsor of the Green New Deal. And so it was very interesting to watch this walk back in many respects, to see how Joe Biden was trying to say, and this is obviously a pitch to the swing voters there in Pennsylvania, countries or cities and counties and states that have really seen the fracking boom. He was trying to distance himself from that and to say, hey, I'm not going to kill your energy jobs. I'm not going to do what Hillary Clinton promised, which is to put a lot of coal miners out of business. You can see there that there was certainly a lot of energy from AOC. We're going to get into this debate also about whether Biden is giving sufficient attention to the camp from the Sanders team. There are a lot of people who are complaining about the transition team, saying that there was not enough people who are Sanders supporters who are part of the transition team for Joe Biden. So stick around, folks. We got a former Mitt Romney campaign advisor coming up. Stick around.
Just the news. All the news and none of the noise.
Hey folks, welcome back to Just the News AM. I am Carrie Sheffield. Well, I want to turn to a very serious topic here. It's the issue of poverty. We just had some, at justthenews.com, we reported on new census data. This is from 2019. And what it showed was that poverty rates were plummeting in 2019. And this was across the board. It was driven primarily among minorities, also women, and also among childhood poverty. So children were seeing steep drops in the poverty rates, which is a really great thing. And so I want to talk about how that happened, what was driving that, but we also want to look forward, obviously, because 2020 is a very different year. And so I can't think of anyone better than my former boss, full disclosure, Edward Connor, to join us. He's a scholar with the American Enterprise Institute. Welcome, Ed.
Well, hey, thank you for having me.
So, Ed, first walk us through the poverty rates and also the inequality. So we saw a decline in inequality. And if we're going to get wonky, there's a measure called the Gini coefficient, which is how much inequality is there among different groups. And that shrunk, the inequality shrunk in the last several years from 2017 to 2019. So walk us through what went right here, the inequality dropped and the poverty rate dropped and the household income went up.
So I think to start to answer that question, you have to understand how poverty is measured by the Census Department. So they measure it before government transfers, and so they show 35 million poor people. As people get jobs, in the census statistics, it's going to show as a decrease in poverty. Now, I think most serious people measure poverty after government transfers, and by that measure, poverty is a lot lower. And by that measure, if a person gets a job, it doesn't necessarily reduce the poverty rate. So the rates that you hear in the media, the rates that you hear often are a very unusual way to calculate. And what they're really showing you is that people at the lowest skill levels, or people at the lowest income levels, had their employment rise a lot faster than it had before. And that put a lot of people into employment. And therefore, it showed before income transfers, people were less poor. So
does this mean that we were
all seen the statistics that show unemployment and growth among the least skilled workers growing faster than any other sector in the economy over the last couple of years.
And does this mean that taxpayers were saving money then if there was less payments going out in the form of welfare, whether that's food stamps or housing? Does this mean that in the last few years that taxpayers were actually getting some savings?
I don't think so. Government spending as a percent of GDP just goes up and up and up. So I think for the most part, what you would find is that as a low-income worker gets employment, they earn an earned income tax credit, and other incentives that try to pay them more money for every hour that they work. So it's possible that unemployment, which was very low the last couple of years, unemployment expenses would have gone down. But many other things like Medicaid and food stamps, if you were to get a low-end job, you would continue to earn those benefits. And so that might have dropped a little bit, but it probably was offset by other expenditures that we make to try to help people at the bottom end of the pay scale. I mean, I don't think people realize this, but we spend over $1 trillion helping people under the age of 65. We spend another $1.5 trillion on people over the age of 65. But if you were to take that money, the $1 trillion of more than that, and divide by 20% times all the people under the age of 65, you discover that we're spending between $20,000 and $25,000 per person in the bottom 20%. All that money's not flowing to that person. A lot of that's flowing to people who are a lot closer to the middle class because politicians are using that money to try to buy votes and influence votes. But you'd see that we're spending an enormous amount on that group. So the small increases in employment are going to have small effects on the amount of money.
So Ed, let's talk 2020 because obviously the coronavirus hit everything. Everything is going to be scawampus, as my dad would like to say. What do you think is going to happen to these? We put up the graph there of household wealth going up. We've got a graph of poverty rates going down.
And the Green New Deal.
What do you think is going to happen in 2020 when we're looking at this? Also on inequality, do you think inequality is going to rise in 2020?
So the Brookings Institute has looked at this through about the end of July, August-ish. Because of the 600 hours a week we were paying workers who were unemployed, what you find is that poverty actually went down during that period. I suspect you'll also see, this is if you measure it after government transfers, which would be the more logical way to measure it. And so what you found is that people at the low end of the spectrum actually went down, and that inequality declined during that period. Now those benefits have run out, and I think we've hit a deadlock in Congress and with the president at this point. So right now people are getting unemployment benefits, but those would tend to be less than the amount of money that they would make for working. So I think you probably find that after the benefits ran out, this is moving in the opposite direction.
And some folks from the White House have said that we are seeing a V-shaped recovery. Do you agree with the V-shaped recovery or Joe Biden's approach, which he says it's a K-shaped recovery?
Well,
what does K-shaped recovery mean, actually, too? I'm just curious, in your take.
I think they're trying to say that people who are at the high end of the wage scale are rebounding fast, and people at the low end are going to rebound slower in their employment. I think what you would find is that people at the high end of the wage scale largely been working from home through the internet and haven't lost their employment, haven't lost their income, and continue to be fairly productive. I think you'd find at the lowest end of the wage scale, there's a lot of people working in hospitalities, restaurants, things like that. Those people have lost their jobs and are largely depending on government benefits at this point to produce income for them because they're not able to work in these restaurants. And so do I think that's going to come rebounding back quickly? No. I think that part of the economy is likely to be slower because I think until we get a vaccine, people are going to be fearful about gathering together in large places, and anybody who earned their living that way, I think it's going to take a while for the economy to create new jobs or for a vaccine to be widespread enough that people would be willing to take that risk.
So what you're saying reminds me of an interview I just did with Wilbur Ross last week at the White House, and he says a lot of these jobs that you mentioned, the service jobs, hotels, restaurants, et cetera, he said they're going to have to be retrained, and that's a big focus of what he's doing. Real fast, Ed, since you're a close confidant and friend, advisor to Mitt Romney, I think a lot of folks were pleasantly surprised on the right to see that he came out in support of Amy Coney Barrett. Were you surprised? Was there a lot of grappling for him to make that choice, first of all? And then secondly, is he going to vote for President Trump?
I don't know luckily I don't know the answer to either of those questions. And I think it'd be wise for me to let Mitt speak for himself. I think from my perspective, it's pretty straightforward. The president is elected for 4 years and so is the Senate. I think the electorate picked the president and the Senate, knowing full well that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was likely to die during that period of time. So I think it is logical for them to fill that. And I think that I assume Mitt follows that logic as well. If you don't own control of the Senate, you don't control the presidency. Honestly, I don't know how going forward we're going to fill Supreme Court slots or any other judgeships. We'll see how that plays out in the future if it's divided. But as long as it's not divided.
All right. Well, Ed, we got to leave it right there. We got to run to commercial break. Ed Conard, author of The Upside of Inequality. Stay tuned. We're going to be more.
every morning with just the news. All the news and none of the noise.
Hey there, welcome back here to Just the News AM. I am Carrie Sheffield. Really glad that you are here. I want to introduce my friend Julio Gonzalez. He's a familiar face here on Real America's Voice. He is a very prominent Latino supporter of President Trump, but he's also a tax expert. He knows everything about the tax code, and he has a lot to say about the New York Times reporting that just came out. Now, the reporting of the New York Times has really been called into question around the president's tax returns. Now, the New York Times is claiming that the president paid less than $800 in personal income tax the last couple years. Julio, what do you think about this?
Well, they also claim that he'd paid over $100 million in the last decade. So when you're in real estate, right, you have those ebbs and flows. Sometimes your properties are in construction, you're losing a lot of money, and that's passing through to your personal tax return. Sometimes you are in the process of making money. But listen, Carrie, all those cities gave President Trump tax incentives because those buildings were vacant in D.C., in New York, in Palm Beach. They weren't generating any tax for those communities. So they went out and asked people to come in and give them incentives to build these buildings back to life. And what did they do? What did President Trump do? He brought them back. He's generating tremendous amount of employment tax with the employees that he created there. Sales tax, property tax, hotel tax. So that was the investment that the city and communities made in giving him those tax credits so that they could ultimately get that investment back. And he did it better than anyone.
Well, and Julio, that's an important point because, and the president made the point in general about the tax code. He said, hey, Joe Biden, you helped to create this tax code to which you're now criticizing. But also, yes, these cities in particular, because he was building real estate in these cities and city and state tax codes are specifically designed right now to incentivize people. I know my libertarian friends out there would say, this is about a crony capitalism giveaway, and let's just get rid of all tax credits. Let's get rid of all of this and have just a level playing field, keep everything cleaner and simpler. What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, these tax credits specifically were designed because buildings were empty. You know, we're trying to bring back different areas, different communities. And when you have buildings in there dormant and not collecting any taxes for that area, you know, you have to give some incentives. We did that with the Opportunity Zones in the Tax Reform Act. Previous to that, we gave out historic tax credits and other types of tax credits to bring back these buildings back to life, to create jobs. So is it an expense or is it an investment? Do you want people to come in and bring these buildings back to life to create employment, to create taxes, property taxes? All that, I think, was a good investment, right, by the communities and by the federal government to create these tax incentives. I mean, actually, you know, the tax credits received were a lot less than the taxes produced, and those taxes are produced now for the next decades, right? So it's good investment by all.
Now, you've been really critical of the New York Times and whoever it was that got them this information. You are writing an op-ed where you call the New York Times story a, quote, nothing burger. What is the law here about someone who leaks confidential tax information? Is that a felony? Is this a crime?
There's no doubt there was a felony committed, right? And I'm sure we're going to figure out who committed that felony. You only had so many people that had access to that. So I'm sure there's a trail there. But, right, you can't give away that. But more importantly, why can't you give it away? Because, you know, probably President Trump didn't want to give his tax return. Two reasons, right? He's under audit, which he's talked about. Two, trade secrets in there, Carrie, right? This is how he's done his business over the last decade and how he's built an empire in real estate, but ultimately created a lot of jobs and created a lot of taxes for those communities. But why should he have to give it away so everyone in the world can copy him? I think that was a trade secret that he's been trying to protect for him and his family.
Well, and that's interesting because he's certainly not a traditional president. If you look at the tax returns, Typically, maybe they get speaking fees. In Hillary Clinton's, the would-be president, she certainly got lots of speaking fees, but that's a much more straightforward business model. Sometimes they get book publishing fees. Again, that's very straightforward. There's no competitive advantage there because it really is just the name and the brand of the person, as opposed to what you're talking about strategically, the business plan, and as you mentioned, the phrase trade secrets. Why hasn't the president mentioned that?
You know, I'm not sure why he doesn't mention it. I think the campaign and his advisors should mention it. I think that's an important aspect to mention. And if they're listening, that's a point I would bring up all the time. I would bring it up right away. I mean, I think it's so important. But it's no different than New York and all these different states trying to attract Amazon. DC just gave them a tremendous amount of tax credits to bring Amazon there. No different, right? And Amazon reported that they didn't pay any taxes either. Well, they got all those incentives from all the different areas that they're moving to. Moving out of California, that doesn't give them the incentives, and we'll see how that investment pays off for California. They don't want to give incentives. They're going to lose all those jobs and lose that tax base. I think that was a big gamble, and I think it's to the victory of those other states. But you see, the states are doing the same thing for Amazon and all the big corporations. Come here, we'll give you incentives. Please do that, and ultimately you won't have taxes for a while because we're investing in these credits in you to bring jobs. I mean, that's really what it is. So everyone's doing it, not just President Trump, right?
Well, certainly. I mean, and that's even part of just the concept of an opportunity zone, is to really hone in on a problematic area that really needs revitalization. I want to go back again to this concept of, or this idea that there was a possible crime committed here by leaking confidential tax information. The possible suspects here might be someone who works internally at the IRS, maybe someone who works in accounting or financial services for the Trump organization. What is the penalty? What is the penalty for someone if they are found to be committing a crime here?
Well, it's a felony, right? And the penalty is 20 years in jail. So, I mean, obviously, this is a major crime that was committed. And I got to think that they're going to figure this out. I think if President Trump wins, I think this is one of the first things on his objective, right, is to figure out how this all happened. I mean, listen, we have to be protected as business owners, as individuals, from our tax returns and the privacy of those, as we have in the federal code. So I'm sure they're going to get to this, and I'm sure it's going to be at the top of the agenda come November 5th.
Sure, but then there's the counterfactual, or the counter argument on this question of trade secrets. I understand that point, but what about the issue of public service and transparency, where that's the argument for people saying the president should release his tax returns because we need to know, where, as they say, who's paying this guy, where are his loyalties? So is there an argument there for transparency?
Yeah, I understand that point. But, again, when you're in business and you're passing on to your family a generation of real estate investing that's been so significant for our country, and you do it in a way that takes advantage of different tax codes, and maybe you want to preserve your ability to be better than anyone that's in the industry, I think that's an important aspect to look at. Now, certainly the personal tax returns, but that doesn't paint the picture. So then you got to go to the business tax returns, because not everything flows through to the personal tax returns. And then that's where you get into the trade secrets, and it's a difficult thing. But listen, President Trump said he'll release them once he's done with the audit with the IRS, right, when it's legal to do so.
Do we know when that is?
Well, whenever the IRS finishes the audit, right? So it's up to them. He's under constant audit. But I guess that gives us the knowledge that, he's been under constant audit with the IRS for the last 20 years. They haven't found anything yet. They haven't taken him to tax court. So far, so good. But, when you're that big and you have those many businesses, you're going to be under audit. And certainly that can take a few years. And that's where we're at. All
right, Julio Gonzalez, we're going to leave it right there. Thanks a lot. And you stick around. We've got a former Clinton advisor from
Every morning with just the news. All the news and none of the noise.
Hey there, welcome back to Just the News AM. I am Carrie Sheffield and glad that you are here. Now, yesterday, the Presidential Debate Commission updated the guidelines to keep the next two presidential debates hopefully a little bit cleaner. I think there are a lot of folks out there who would agree that this was a much needed control measure. But we've got an expert here on the Democratic side. His name is Michael Gordon. He's a Democratic strategist, has worked in the Clinton White House. Welcome, Michael. Good morning.
Good morning. Good to be here.
So, obviously, we've put up the Biden tweets. We've gotten some reaction already from Democrats who say this was a home run for Biden. But what about the fact that he name-called, he called the president a clown, he told him to shut up? Is this the man who says he wants to be the high road, did he actually take it?
Yeah, so I think both candidates lost the debate. I think Trump, for all the reasons that you've heard about and have seen, had a terrible debate. But I think Biden missed an opportunity to close the deal with the American people. They've been ahead in the polls very steadily throughout the race, still through today, but he did not close the deal. He did not sufficiently make succinct, strong arguments on why he should be the person to replace Trump. People have made up their minds about Trump, but he didn't necessarily sell them that he is the right alternative, that people should change their minds if they've made up their minds about Trump.
So what do you think he needs to do more of?
So I think he did a good job when he spoke directly to the camera and spoke directly to the American people. He needs to do much more of that. He also shouldn't play on Trump's ground, right? When he said shut up and things like that, like that's Trump territory. Sure, respond very quickly, succinctly when you're playing defense, but then pivot to the issues that you win on. You know, he wins, according to the polls, on the coronavirus. He wins on gun safety and health care and climate change. So pivot to the issues you win on, quickly parry the president and his kookiness, but then talk about the issues and talk directly to the people that you win on. But Biden needs to be succinct and not play Trump's game, because Trump wins his game. Biden needs to play his own game on who he is and where his values are.
Now, earlier in the show, we put up a tweet from the president. He replied to Ari Fleischer, who was a spokesman in the George W. Bush White House. And Fleischer went and reviewed the tape, and he looked at how basically this interruption actually started with Joe Biden. So he said it was the third volley, the third exchange. It was actually Biden who interrupted Trump 3 times. And as we all know, Trump's mantra is, if you hit me, I hit back 10 times harder. He certainly did that. But Trump has also said he also was receiving unfair treatment from the moderator. That's something we've seen over and over from folks on the conservative side. What's your read on the moderator? Do you think, I mean, for example, just the way he phrased certain things, he said racial sensitivity training, even though a lot of people said the training itself is basically telling white people you should be ashamed of yourself and that you're inherently racist no matter what you do, that the critical race theory has been, very inflammatory for a lot of people. And the way that it was propped up or framed by Wallace really received a lot of criticism on the right. I mean, what's your read on it?
Yeah, so I don't think that's reflective of racial sensitivity training in general. That's sort of a small kernel of it that people use to criticize it. Being a moderator in these things is very hard. It is hard, particularly when you have a president who doesn't want to play by the rules, who wants to play by. And I think Wallace did his best, and there were maybe 1 or 2 times where he became part of the debate story himself, where maybe he could have pulled back a little bit, but he was trying to take control and really trying to push the case on issues that the American people cared about. My sense is that Wallace wanted a substantive debate on the issues that people really vote on, and he was trying to steer the conversation that way. And Trump was Trump, and he likes the sideshow. He thinks the sideshow helps him, and sort of being raucous and interrupting and creating rules helps him. I'm not sure it does. In fact, I'm confident it does not. But Wallace was trying to keep the candidates on a substantive debate. And I would say I would like to see the future moderators try to do their best to really keep the candidates on a substantive plane with the issues, because I think that's what people vote about. You know, at the end of the day, people vote about issues that affect their lives. They don't vote on personality. They don't vote on sideshows. They really vote on the substance. You know, if people voted on personality, Trump wouldn't have won. You know, enough voters felt that he spoke to their economic pain, and that's why he won.
So Michael, I want to real quick, before we got to run, pivot a little bit and talk about, since you worked in the Clinton White House, the Bill Clinton White House, there was new revelations from the intelligence community. This is the official government community, saying that basically the FBI noted that Hillary Clinton appeared to allegedly the Hillary Clinton campaign was basically involved in cooking up or trying to trump up, if we can say, the allegations of collusion. So we got, just real quick.
Yeah, so if there's a there, which I'm sure there's not, it should be prosecuted. But, you know, Comey, who's not a liberal Democrat, didn't pursue this. Christopher Wray, who's the current FBI director, is not a liberal Democrat, isn't pursuing this. So I don't think this is a real story. And it goes back to the bigger issue. Like, this is 2016. This is about someone who's not running for office. This is not what Americans care about right now. Americans care about getting the virus under control. They care about getting the economy back. They care about their health care, protecting their health care and expanding it. This story is a sideshow and not what it is important to real Americans.
All right, Michael, we got to run. We appreciate it. Thank you for joining us, Michael Gordon. Stick
All right,
around.
thanks so much.
We're going to talk about Latinos and President Trump.
Every morning with just the news. All the news and none of the noise.
Hey there, welcome back to Just the News AM. I'm Carrie Sheffield, and so glad that you are here. Let's talk again about the presidential debate. Now, there was a very famous clip that's been going around. President Trump tweeted about it. Let's take a listen. This is from Telemundo. And there you can see the poll that was mentioned was from Telemundo. But we had some questions about the methodology. It appears that that poll was actually a Twitter poll, which is definitely not scientific. And there was no verification that the people who were taking that poll actually spoke Spanish. So we want to put that disclaimer. However, we have noted that the president has seen an uptick in support among the Latino community. And so my next guest is here from the Republican Party to talk about this. Good morning, Ms. Yanni Nunez, correct?
Yali Nunez, yes. Correct.
Yes, Yali. Good to have you. So, Yali,
thank you.
This clip about the Telemundo polling, we did, as I said, note that the poll itself appears not to be scientific.
Yeah, well, we are seeing an increase of support from Hispanics across the nation. Many Hispanics across the nation are supporting President Trump, and it's mainly because this is a president that has delivered for Hispanics, regardless of what Democrats said. We've seen the lowest unemployment numbers with this president in the Hispanic community, and that is obviously one of the reasons why Hispanics are supporting this president. They want to see growth, they want to see their communities protected, and they have seen an improvement under the Trump administration. We see the Hispanic Prosperity Order, the executive order that the White House recently issued, which focuses also on school choice, which is an important issue for the Hispanic community. And that is why you're going to continue to see Hispanics believing not only that the president won the debate, but also that this is the president that they want to support on November 3rd.
And so, Yali, it is true that the president is seeing momentum. However, he does have a big obstacle as far as Biden is very far ahead in the polls. And even Hillary Clinton in 2016 did defeat Donald Trump among Latinos. So what is driving this gap?
Well, you also can say that Joe Biden is seeing a lower support from the Hispanic community than Hillary Clinton did in 2016. And that is a problem, a big problem for him, especially in places like Florida, that we're seeing a lot of the Cuban population, the Venezuelans supporting the president. And it's mainly because the socialist policies that are coming out from the Democrat Party right now scare Hispanics. They don't want to see socialism here in the United States. They escape, many Hispanics, myself included, escape from socialist policies in places like Cuba, like Venezuela, and all throughout Latin America. So we don't want to see that here in the United States. Hispanics come to the United States for opportunities to realize the American dream, and that American dream would not be possible with Joe Biden in the White House and with those who surround him, socialists like Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. We don't want to see those people implementing policies that are not capitalist and for what this nation stands for.
Yali, one other topic real quick while I have you. We have been hearing some criticism, including from Latinos who were Bernie Sanders supporters, that the Sanders supporters are not being represented enough on the inauguration committee, or the transition committee, if you will, of Biden, that is becoming more establishment, more kind of establishment mainstream Democrats. Even Cindy McCain, who's been a Republican and was married to the Republican nominee in 2008, she's on the transition committee. What do you make of that from the perspective of division here, possibly between the far left on the Democratic Party and then kind of the more middle left?
Yeah, well, the transition team can change as well. And also, I think it's important to highlight that you have, for example, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez saying that they're sure that they're going to be able to pressure Joe Biden implementing the policies such as the new Green Deal that is going to cost approximately $100 trillion to the United States. I mean, these are astronomical numbers. We don't want to see this for our country. These are the socialist left and those who represented Bernie Sanders mainly are the ones pushing for these policies that Joe Biden then goes on stage and says that he's going to support. And that concerns not only Hispanics, but every single American in this country. And that is why on November 3rd, we need to vote. We need to vote in person. We need to do it for President Trump so we can continue to see improvement in the policies, in the economy that he handled so well before the COVID-19 hit us and artificially interrupted the growth. So on November 3rd, we have to vote for President Trump.
All right, Yale Nunez, we're going to leave it right there. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And we are going to come right back. We have my colleague David Brody had an exclusive interview with a key member of the coronavirus task force. You don't want to miss this. You've seen Deborah Birx everywhere. She has these epic neckties. You're going to get a sneak preview here on our show. Stay here.
every morning with just the news. All the news and none of the noise.
Hey there, welcome back to Just the News AM. I'm Carrie Sheffield. So glad you've been here along the ride with us. Now I want to give you a sneak preview here as we close out. My colleague David Brody, who's the host of the Water Cooler Show, it's on 4 p.m. Eastern on Pluto and Roku and all those good places. He had an exclusive interview with Dr. Deborah Birx from the Coronavirus Task Force. Take a quick listen.
So take me through Vaccine 101 a little bit here as it relates to COVID-19. I mean, how long would you have to be inoculated for? How many times? I mean, would this be a COVID-19 vaccine once a what? Once a year? Would it be more than that? I mean, I'm trying to understand how that might work.
Well, that's a great question, and that's why these first individuals, and again, I want to thank every American who has come forward to volunteer for these trials, because they are breaking the ground not only to safety and efficacy, but they'll also tell us how durable and for how long that immune response lasts once we demonstrate efficacy. The good thing about this virus is we know what the immune response, we know what we're targeting, and we know the immune response that we want to see. So we'll be able to measure that over time. So although we're only 7 or 8 months into knowing really about this virus, we know how to measure immunogenicity over time. And so those original vaccines groups will be studied over time to really be able to answer your specific question, is how long immunogenicity and efficacy last.
And there's Dr. Deborah Birx. Stay tuned to watch that at 4 p.m. Eastern with my colleague, Mr. David Brody. We hope you had a great ride here with us on Just the News AM. Stay tuned. We will see you tomorrow.